Escape to Southern Point. The Stray, Volume 2 in Jennifer Olmstead's Virginia Southern Point collection. Copyright 2017, 2024, Jennifer Olmstead and Titian Press. All rights reserved worldwide. Dedication for Dave, who survived.
Chapter 2. Dare stayed 5 days in the hospital. 5 days of staring at the ceiling, willing his collarbone and 4 of his ribs to fuse, and his left lung to stay inflated. 5 days of soggy food, ginger ale sucked through a straw, of peeing into a plastic bottle and sailing along for hours at a time on Vicodin, and craving his own house and personal routine. Dare hated being away from home. Within the boundaries of his property, within the walls of his house, he knew the state of all things. He knew where his food came from, that it was fresh, and that his hands were clean when he prepared it. He knew when the sheets on his bed were last changed, and when it was time to charge his toothbrush. He knew the condition of each of the 5,304 shingles on the roof of his house, and the creeping path of a newborn hairline crack in his concrete driveway, which he monitored through weekly photo documentation. He had full control over who could enter his personal space, engage him in conversation, or invade the privacy of his thoughts. He hated hospitals. Those artificial environments where people were paid to appear kind and convince you that they somehow knew what was best for you, when in truth they knew nothing about you, or what you missed, or who was waiting for your return. They were empowered to tell you what to do and to keep you there until you were no longer able to leave. In his experience, hospitals were a place not of healing, but of estrangement, separation, and final departure. Dare's mother and maternal grandfather, 2 of the 3 people he loved most in the world, had died in hospitals. Details on the assumed demise of the third person, Dare's father, remained unknown. To this day, no one knew for certain if Thomas Chester Jordan had died, and if so, how horrible the process had been, at whose hands, or the precise location and time at which his death had taken place. After withstanding the necessary procedures to immobilize his arm and collarbone and remove his chest tube, a device any sadist would relish, the continuous infusion of mind-altering pain meds proved impressive in suppressing Dare's full contempt for his surroundings. On his second day as a patient at Coastal Medical Center, he struck a deal with a cooperative nurse, who swore to tell any visitor who might venture toward Dare's room that he was sleeping. In truth, he did sleep much of the time. Not a rejuvenating restful sleep, but an opiate-induced stupor from which he was easily startled into glassy-eyed uselessness. The dose of unstructured time to which he found himself subjected carried with it anxiety over the whereabouts and condition of 3 elements essential to Dare's existence: his cell phone and all the client emails and passwords contained therein, some or all of which could now be exposed and compromised; his cherished car, which he had parked at the old Southern Point General Store on the day of the accident; and lastly, what Dare was certain was his mortally wounded Sirota road bike, one of the first of the designer's new line of custom-built bikes available for sale to the public. For all the expensive floral arrangements courtesy of the partners at Hawkins, Neff and Griffin, the combination of sincere and obligatory get-well cards from corporate clients accumulating on the windowsill of Dare's private hospital room, and the assorted phone calls and attempted visits from colleagues and one forgiving ex-girlfriend, it was his housekeeper, Patty Beacons, who got Dare's request for a ride home when the doctors gave him the okay to return to his life. Patty was the one person he trusted enough to observe him in this unprecedented state of physical disrepair and vulnerability. A widowed grandmother with enough time on her hands to be lonely, Patty had responded, 3 years earlier, to Dare's newspaper ad for a new housekeeper. She'd shown up at his door that day, thick-set and energetic, her graying blonde hair in a no-nonsense pixie cut, and dressed in white scrubs and tennis shoes, because, she explained, if my clothes don't show any dirt, it means I haven't been cleaning well enough. Oh, and I use a lot of bleach, and bleach can't ruin something if it's already white. As part of their brief interview, Dare had walked Patty through his neo-Victorian townhouse, located in Chesapeake Bay Commons, a gated enclave on the edge of Norfolk's Chesapeake Bay, across the city line from Virginia Beach. Purchased while it was under construction 8 years prior, the 3-story brick unit was among the best built in the area, boasting heritage wood flooring, bronze plumbing fixtures, black stainless appliances, and 10-foot ceilings. Each of the Commons' 20 homes also had 3 fireplaces, a landscaped front entrance and portico, a fenced-in backyard, a finished, heated garage, and an unobstructed view of the Chesapeake Bay. As they'd scaled the staircase and visited each room in the house, Patty asked Dare about his artwork and furniture, jotted nonstop in a palm-sized notebook, and then ticked off her additional qualification. I'm bonded and have a clean background. I worked on the Navy base for 40 years, now I head up the event volunteers at the USO. And I understand privacy, so if you want me to stay out of some areas of your house, you let me know what's off limits. Otherwise, I'll learn my way around the place and keep it up to your standards, I guarantee it. He had hired her that day. Patty's Tuesday and Thursday visits to Dare's house gave him a hushed sense of family for the hour he was with her in the morning before he left for the office, or the clip of time they sat together in the kitchen and talked when he got home from work. She would pack up her plastic caddy with supplies, which for a reason unknown to Dare included a pair of binoculars, place it by the front door, and then wait for him to return from the accounting firm before heading home to her post-World War II bungalow. That way, she could brief him on what she'd accomplished that day: laundry, windows, cleaning out the refrigerator. She might have freshened up Dare's bespoke business suits with a portable steamer, or, if they had hung unworn for more than a month in the closet, dropped them off at the dry cleaners. Perhaps she had discovered some new way to arrange the contents of his medicine cabinet, or reorder his military book collection. The specific household tasks she executed while in his house didn't much matter to Dare, because whatever she did, he was always left with the impression that what she cared about, most of all, was that he was alive and well. Once Dare's nurse had wheeled him off the elevator and out to the hospital's patient entrance, Patty ducked into the back of her compact station wagon and shuffled around fabric bags brimming with groceries, and a row of baskets overflowing with what looked like blankets, sheets, or some other type of fabric. I got the usual for you, so you'll have what you need, she said. The usual was Dare's standing once-a-week shopping trip, involving 2 stops. The first stop was Height Traders for veggie burgers, certified humane eggs, poultry and dairy, fruits, nuts and vegetables, 2 bottles of Mayomi Pinot Noir 2015, rubbing alcohol for sanitizing doorknobs and switch plates, and bleach for disinfecting and laundry whitening. The second stop was TJ Maxx's gourmet food section for imported French mustard, balsamic vinegar-based ketchup, green tea and Sumatran coffee. Why does everyone say Sumatra when it's Sumatran? Dare asked Patty. Is it the America flag? Olive and coconut oil, and imported Scottish tart cherry preserves. The cherry preserves sat on the refrigerator shelf for months, to then be handed without comment to Patty, tucked into her caddy and transported to her house for quiet yet appreciated consumption. The ejected preserves were then replaced by a new jar, destined to sit on the same refrigerator shelf, unopened, beginning the cycle again. Neither of them spoke of the preserves, ever. Patty managed to free up enough space to squeeze Dare and 2 bags of unwanted hospital accoutrements into her cluttered station wagon. Buckle up, she instructed him. Relieved to be en route to things familiar, he settled into his seat and closed his eyes, allowing Patty to shuttle him home in silence, stopping twice along the way to pick up his prescriptions and fill up at the gas station. Mr. Dare, are you sure you don't want me to stay overnight? Patty asked once Dare was settled in his bedroom, encircled by medicine, bottled water, and a selection of newspapers, which she had dissected by dividing them one by one into sections and slicing down the gutter with scissors, so he wouldn't have to extend his arms to read them. Hear me now. If I get my hands on that fiend who tried to kill you, she threatened. And your left arm, too. How in the world will you write or drive? First, Patty, You know that Southern Point has its own set of rules. And whoever and whatever it was that hit me could be hidden anywhere. In a barn, in the swamp, in the next state. Who knows if the vehicle was even registered? It could have been one of those farm-use trucks that doesn't have a license plate. How can the police look for something I didn't see? She was unsatisfied. You'd think someone saw something, some little thing that could help. Second, he said, cruising the newspaper for headlines. My ambidexterity is about 55-45, you know that. Left hand, right hand. What does it matter if you can only use one arm? She cried. Now that I see you here, I think you should have stayed in the hospital a few more days. He stifled the urge to debate the subject, relieved by the return to familiar surroundings, agreeable smells, and the underrated contentment of lying in his own bed, which Patty had made with layers of white sheets and thin blankets that held the slight fragrance of chlorine bleach, blended with floral fabric softener from a bottle Dare guessed had a label that was varying shades of purple and illustrated with flowers whose existence no botanist could confirm. She'd shared her trick with Dare on one of the first days she'd worked at the townhouse. He had walked in on her while she was soaking his white bedsheets, which she stirred with a wooden spoon as though they were witch's brew, in the white porcelain kitchen sink. You just feel better in a nice clean bed, she had told him, explaining that she pre-soaked the sheets in bleach and water before she washed them, and then added 2 cups of fabric softener to rinse cycle. There's a utility sink in the laundry room, Patty. Wouldn't that be easier? Dare asked. Easier, maybe, but by doing them in the kitchen, it deep cleans your white sink too, she said, proud of her efficiency. Dare shrugged. He couldn't argue the point, imagining the pantry in her little house stocked full of bleach bottles. That occasion marked the first and last time he evaluated her housekeeping methodology. From her place in Dare's bedroom doorway, Patty tisk-tisked as she watched him grapple with the newspaper. Well, you just let me know if you need anything at all. I'm a few teeny minutes away, she said, wearing a look of maternal concern. Call me, Mr. Dare. I'll be here in a jiff. I'll be fine on my own, Dare promised. Have a good night. I wish. Oh, never mind, Patty fretted. What? He asked, attempting to skim the business section of the Washington Post. His eyes and brain were not cooperating with one another. She let out a weighty sigh. Have you thought about getting a dog or something, Mr. Dare? She asked. Some kind of company for yourself? Dare put down the newspaper and frowned. What made you think of that? You're too young to be alone all the time is all, she said. Loneliness is for, well, you know, old people. He leaned back on his pillows and closed his eyes. I'm fine. The Jag is fine. And my bike, he babbled. I don't understand how someone repaired it. Who could do that? I have it. I have things just the way I like them. In their place. She crossed her arms and looked to the heavens. Oh, all right then. I'll let myself in tomorrow morning. And I'm coming over every day till you're better. And don't even think about trying to pay me. We'll discuss it tomorrow, Dare said, groggy from his pain pill kicking fully in. You'll lock it. The door? I'll set the alarm and I'll lock the door behind me, she assured him. And I'm sliding a chair across the top step so you don't fall down the staircase. He was fading. What? Those pills, she argued. You could wake up and lose your balance. I'd rather you bump into the chair than break your other arm or worse. Patty's footsteps padded down the wooden staircase, followed by the loud rustling of crumpling paper. Dare guessed that she was taking out his trash and recycling, 2 chores that were not part of her job description, but which she insisted upon doing anyway. He sank down into the wedge of memory foam bed pillows she had positioned for him and slept hard for the next 12 hours. After that, Dare did not leave home for the rest of the week. He did, however, take a twice-a-day walk around the backyard to prevent blood clots, and he also conducted numerous compulsive inspections of the bike. The Ben Sirota bike, signed by the designer, made to order, fit to order. It resided in Dare's climate-controlled storage room, which he could access through dual entry points off the first-floor laundry room and the outside deck. Despite his efforts, Dare could not detect the damage he was certain the bike had sustained in the hit-and-run accident on Creed's Run Road. He had a hazy recollection of the boy who found him semi-conscious in the ditch that day, trying to walk the bike away from the scene and up to the house trailer. The bike's handlebar was mangled, jammed into the front tire. So jammed that the boy had to lift the front wheel off the ground to hoist the bike across the lawn. All traces of that were gone now. With a magnifying glass run over the entire frame and wheel, Dare completed 2 full inspections his first day home. He found no evidence of the impact. Best case scenario, the repair would have cost thousands of dollars. And then there was the skill required to complete the restoration. He knew of no one in Southern Virginia who worked on Sirota bikes. Even more perplexing was the fact that whoever repaired the bike did so in just 4 days. He sequestered himself in his room most of the day and night, took extra calcium, drank green tea and tangerine juice, and restricted himself to a diet of salmon, greens, bananas, and walnuts. In less than a week, he was back at work. The firm of Hawkins, Neff, and Griffin, CPAs, and its 33 employees occupied a penthouse suite of offices in a tall bronze and stone building on Norfolk's historic waterfront. Per managing partner Bill Hawkins' directive, all HNG's suites' interior finishes were completed in varying shades of gray, a color palette broken apart by men whose dark suit jackets hung on carved wood behind the door valet hangers, leaving a flash of blinding white button-down shirts with starched hidden plackets, monogrammed cuffs, and platinum cufflinks. No gold here, no exceptions, too ostentatious. Ties, double Windsor knotted always, came in 3 muted shades: cranberry, slate, and a dribble of neutral butter yellow in the form of paisleys and stripes. Hawkins, Neff, and Griffin's lone female partner, Janice Vanberg, along with the firm's female support staff, stuck with navy blue, gray, or black skirt suits or pantsuits and cream or ecru silk shell tops. With 2 glaring exceptions, partners and staff moved about the office in efficient near silence, their heads filled with audit recommendations, tax return data, the thickness of War and Peace, deals and takeovers, corporate valuations, business downfalls and bankruptcies. It all hung in the air like string lights, the strands coursing from office to office relaying muttered phone calls, whispered huddles, and diplomatic but chastising client emails. And it was always on, burning with an annoyance quelled by more analysis, more calculations, and more massaging, which of course was made possible only by more staff hours. Exception number 1 to the HNG paradigm was Buddy Sams, who demonstrated a pathological resentment for the intellectual elitism and discipline Dare Jordan embodied. "I swear that guy's as tightly laced as his wingtips," he hissed to Chris Hill, a 24-year-old staff accountant at HNG. The 2 men sat in Buddy's office, directly across the hall from Dare's, drinking their morning coffees, fresh from the kitchen's push-button espresso bar, an indulgence Bill Hawkins had not only approved but personally underwritten because, without good coffee, none of us would survive the 60-hour work weeks here. With the door wide open, Buddy and Chris watched Dare wince as he plodded through unloading the contents of his briefcase onto his desk using his right arm and hand, since his left remained in a sling. Buddy made no effort to cross the hall and help Dare with the task, and Chris wouldn't make a move in that direction without Buddy's consent. Buddy stood and rubbed his lower back, overburdened from carrying around 100 extra pounds of weight for most of his 60 years, and began pacing. "Why come back to work so soon?" he griped. "I mean, he could have milked another week out of this thing. We can get by without him. Might be better for the firm if we did." Fearful of endangering his first post-CPA examination job by disagreeing with Buddy, Chris forced a weak smile of concurrence. "Dare Jordan's got a lot of big clients," he muttered. "I don't think they want anyone else touching their accounts." "Fuck," Buddy spewed. "Who needs a master's degree in finance anyway? We crunch numbers here is all. That ain't gonna change anytime soon. And what's with him packing his own fucking lunch? Jesus. He makes $500,000 a year. The restaurants down here aren't good enough? Can't he eat at the club? I swear to God." He pounded on his desk with his fist. That guy was born with a fucking stick up his ass. Having succeeded in emptying his briefcase and organizing his desk, Dare closed his office door partway to hang up his coat, just as exception number 2, Melissa McAfee, the firm's office manager, appeared in the hallway. She smoothed her frizzy strawberry blonde hair, tugged at her tight pink dress, and stood as straight and tall as possible in 5-inch platform heels before she knocked on the door. Obnoxious at times, most times in Dare's opinion, her redeeming quality was her lack of interest in much of anything outside of HNG and its staff. She gobbled up her daily tasks of configuring office space, orienting new employees, and ordering furniture, supplies, and equipment like a hungry kid inhaling a handful of jelly beans. She had no complaints about working tax season, weekends, or late nights, and she was loyal. In consideration of all this, Bill Hawkins overlooked her violation of the firm's dress code. "Welcome back," she gushed, easing herself through the doorway. "Dare, we were all so worried. To think that you could have... Well, I'm so relieved you're all right." Her blushing merged with a copious supply of freckles, hiding some heavy facial lines, the result of a lifetime of unblocked sun exposure on a fair Irish complexion. She waited expectantly for Dare to respond, her face frozen in a toothy, submissive smile. "Thanks for the teddy bear, Melissa." "It was a nice thought," he forced out, wondering why in God's name a grown woman would buy him a child's stuffed toy with a heart-shaped lollipop velcroed to its paw, and attach a card around its neck that read, "We can barely stand it here without you." Dare simply could not comprehend that sort of thought process. Cute, as either concept or descriptor, did not figure within the Jordan family's consciousness. "Ah, you know, Dare, just a little TLC for ya," she said, turning crimson again. "Do you need anything, any help, getting your office shipshape?" "Thank you for asking, but no," he replied, anxious to send her on her way. "I'm sure I'll be fine as long as I take things at a slow pace today." Melissa sidestepped to the back of the office door, gently picked a fleck of lint from his hanging coat, examined it, and then put it in her dress pocket. The gesture made the hair on Dare's neck stand up. He wondered if she went through his trash too, looking for souvenirs. "So, any plans for Thanksgiving?" she asked, lowering her chin while she waited out his answer. A chunk of hair fell over one eye and she tucked it behind her ear. "Dinner, with friends," he lied. "How about you?" "Big dinner, with my family, here in town." She was hopeful. "We have plenty of room for one more." "You mean me?" he asked. "Thank you, Melissa, but as I said, I'm already committed." He pointed to some papers on his desk. "And I have work to catch up on. I need to get to it." "Oh well," she pouted, turning on her heel. "See you later." He closed his door tight behind her and began reading, printing, and filing a week's worth of messages and emails. He went about the process in multiple steps. First, he printed out the emails. Then he handwrote notes for his reply on the email. Then he replied and sent the email. After receiving confirmation that the email left the outbox and landed in the sent file, he printed out the sent reply and placed all the hard copies in his client correspondence files. By the end of his 4-step process, he had memorized the contents of the correspondence in its entirety and had no need to look at them again. At 2:30, the caller ID screen on Dare's desk phone blinked with a call from home. It was Patty, checking in on him, offering to make dinner before she left for the day. "How are you making out, Mr. Dare?" She answered her question before he could. "I'm sure you're tired out already. I can whip up something for you before I leave," she said. "It's no trouble at all. I have no plans tonight." She followed that with, "No set time I have to be home." Phone air followed her last sentence. Dare held his breath and counted to 10. "Thank you, Patty, but I've already planned on veggie burgers and a salad tonight. I have to detox from that wretched hospital food." "Detox," she shrieked. "Veggie burgers, these kooky health nut ideas nowadays. Pardon me, Mr. Dare, but I think what you really need is a good home-cooked meal for a change." A nice chunk of roast, some potatoes, some real food. Dare's refusal to consume any protein resulting from factory-farmed or otherwise tortured animals, a category encompassing most of American livestock, came from a good place. His mother, Diana, had shared with Dare Temple Grandin's works on American livestock farming and slaughtering methods, and after reading the books, Dare joined his mother in shunning any meat or poultry that wasn't certified humane. This made accepting Patty's gift of a chunk of beef roast out of the question. "I appreciate your concern, Patty," he answered, mustering up his most placating tone to muffle the rejection to follow. "Once I'm off the pain pills, and my stomach's back to 100% again, I'll think about other foods. Too much variety would destroy my stomach." Her offer was non-viable but sincere, aimed solely at his well-being, but he restricted her admission into his life to small increments. She already knew his house and habits, and the face he showed to the world, but he wasn't quite ready to get close enough to her to risk a sense of personal loss if she somehow exited the scene by retiring or moving away, or worse. "Oh, crumbs, Mr. Dare." Patty blew an excruciating sigh through the phone. "Anything else I can do for you while I'm here?" Dare considered her offer. "Tell me again how my car and bike found their way back home again. Was it the police?" "It was a woman, Mr. Dare." "An older woman?" Dare fell over himself with the words, not wanting to imply that he considered Patty old at 63. He had a hell of a time picturing the elderly woman from the red and white trailer driving his car 20 miles in city traffic to return his bike. And if she did manage the trip to his house, how would she get home? And how did the Sirota repair come about? "Patty, was it a petite woman who brought them back? A woman with white hair?" he asked. "No, not at all," Patty said. "A woman called the house the morning you got out of the hospital. Real nice. Asked if she could come by and return your things. The day she came, she stayed in the car, a black SUV. I could see her a little through the kitchen window, long dark hair and sunglasses. Giant sunglasses, like the celebrities wear in those pictures of them going through the airports and places like that. Mostly younger people wear those. But the man who drove your car home came to the door. He was my age, maybe, and a real gentleman. From Southern Point, he told me. And they brought back all your things, neat as a pin. Clothes all washed and folded. Your bike, you saw, it looks like brand new. And your wallet had your cards and the $1,000 you always carry in it. Everything was safe and sound. Not one thing touched. All in that little purse thing of yours for under the bike seat. Didn't get their names, though. Purse. Are you referring to my bike satchel? He corrected her. If you say so. Seems an awful lot like a purse if you ask me, she said. Anyway, that's who returned all your things. That's interesting, especially about the bike. There's no one out near Southern Point who would know what to do with a Sirota, he said. The repair was expensive, 4 figures. I'm surprised they didn't leave me a bill. I'll have to figure out who they are. The phone line went silent again. Anything else, Mr. Dare? Patty asked, reaching a bit. She sensed there was something on his mind. Yes, he started. I need a... The idea came to him as he said the words. Gift basket. A gift basket? Sure, Mr. Dare. You want me to call your florist? Do you need it delivered by the end of the day? Not the florist this time. I thought, would you pick up some Sunday dinner stuff at the grocery store and put it together yourself? Certainly. Who's it for? She asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. I mean, any idea how many people? What kind of things do you want me to get? He racked his brain, trying to remember what he had seen in the old house trailer before he blacked out. He couldn't recall anything significant except the beige love seat and the impression of less than enough of everything. How about you make it Thanksgiving fare? You know, a smoked turkey, fruit and some good bread, and candy. He remembered the malodorous dog. And some dog treats. Put together a basket that you would like to receive yourself, Patty. For 2 or 3 people and a kid, and a dog, an old dog. That should do it. Okay then, she said, pleased to have a mission for the day. I'll head out to the store as soon as we hang up and have it ready for you when you get home tonight. Now, don't you work too hard. See you then. Dare answered. A surge of exuberance hit him as he hung up the phone. It felt foreign to him. He couldn't pin down the last time he had allowed spontaneity to override well-thought-out planning and execution. He caught his reflection in the window. He was smiling. Like a train wreck, Dare's journey to his current state of social detachment and self-obsession, a process 3 years in the making, was as relentless as it was unintentional. Soon after, he began commuting 8 hours each way to Pittsburgh on weekends to sit with his dying mother, Diana, in her hospital room. His personal life took a giant lurch backward. Dare's last girlfriend, Mara, was pretty and slender and passably intelligent, earning her living as the manager of an upscale women's clothing boutique. She had pounced on Dare when he visited her store one day in search of a birthday gift for his mother. After a few coffee shop dates, which Mara initiated, Dare extended some half-hearted reciprocity and took her to dinner. From there, she showed up to take his arm at parties. She sat on the edge of his living room sofa on Saturday mornings, sipping coffee and waiting for him to dismiss her from his company the morning after a Friday night sleepover, so that she could take her Pomeranian to the dog groomer, or get her long blonde hair extensions maintained, because, she explained to Dare, foreplay and sex sometimes loosened them. She laughed just long enough at Dare's occasional jokes, smiled across the table at him in restaurants, and leaned into him when they watched movies together. She gave a technically effectual blowjob, adequate pressure, sporadic moans, eye contact. She always swallowed. She initiated sex most of the time, and in a variety of positions, said no to nothing. She accommodated Dare's needs like it was her career and she was vying for the corner office. Like a machine. And she kept coming back for more. Mara never challenged Dare's physical and emotional absences from their relationship, and accepted his exclusion of her from Diana's crisis, which cut through the second half of their year-long liaison. Then one day she arrived at Dare's house, unannounced, as he was packing for a trip home to Pittsburgh. Mara made the mistake of telling him she wanted to go along to meet Diana, before it was too late, in case things between them finally went somewhere. Her request was out of bounds. Dare didn't love her, and was certain he couldn't love her, making an introduction to his hospitalized mother, whose new medication left her disoriented much of the time, impossible, and an awkward one-night stay at Holcomb House, misleading. He dispatched Mara then and there, in less than a minute. My mother's situation is private, off-limits, Mara. We both know that our relationship isn't going anywhere it hasn't already gone. You and I, we're done here. Would you please move your car out of my driveway? Stunned but compliant, she did as he asked, making a clean withdrawal from his life, with tears but without argument. Looking back on that exchange, Dare rationalized that the ease of extrication from the relationship was a testament to its lack of viability. From his perspective, the harsh, abrupt approach was, in fact, a service to both parties. Dinner and drinks with Dare's friends and colleagues went next, lost to catching up on all the weekend errands and chores he missed while he was away in Pennsylvania. Most days, his house phone and doorbell were silent. After his mother's funeral put an end to his constant travel, he developed a routine of shopping and tinkering with his townhouse maintenance, along the way indulging in new and various methods of self-improvement. There was at-home tooth whitening to erase coffee, tea, and red wine stains. That consumed an hour a week. And learning to give himself a manicure. After all, a firm handshake was an important first impression, and germs could hide in the nooks and crannies of ragged cuticles. On Fridays, he bought almonds and dried cherries by the pound and repackaged them in single-serving plastic bags, while homebrewing a week's worth of green tea laced with honey. He starched and ironed his handkerchiefs, pressing in knife-sharp creases. On one Saturday, after watching a segment about hurricanes on the Weather Channel, he created a reinforced hurricane closet, stocked with MREs, crank radio and flashlight, batteries, and thermal blankets. On another, he organized his large walk-in closet by clothing type and color, labeling each wooden hanger with an item name and description. These rituals spawned a sense of comfort and certainty he craved in his newfound status as a 39-year-old orphan. Dare's lifelong interest in cycling as a form of recreation and fitness transformed into a full-blown avocation, until it was the absence of cycling that became noteworthy. His trips weren't about pleasure or even performance. He wasn't chasing meditation or communion with the inner corners of his soul. The ritual was a type of fuel, propelling him forward in other aspects of his life. His short, occasional cycling trips down the quiet roads of Southern Point lengthened and multiplied until he was gone for 8 or 9 hours on most Saturdays and Sundays. He kept a detailed journal entry of each bike ride, including weather conditions, traffic, distance, and his mood, before, mid-ride, and after. Weekdays on his way home from work, he prowled bike shops in pursuit of the newest water bottles, aerodynamic helmets, and protein bars. It all proved effective in honing his unstructured time down to about 45 minutes a night, a period insufficient for introspection, regret, or excessive anxiety. Dare didn't know the span of his new lifestyle, and he was fine with not knowing. Unless it related to financial projections or corporate valuations, he refused to look into the future. When she had been well, which was most of her 59 years, Dare's mother, Diana, was a strong, pretty woman, a natural athlete. Her clear blue eyes and broad smile lit up any room she entered. An aura of freshness enveloped her. Every time Dare hugged her, he caught the clean, sweet scent of blue grass, her signature perfume. Diana had worn her thick blonde hair in a flipped-up bob since before Dare could remember, the one variable in the style being an occasional platinum streak added by her hairdresser at the start of the summer. Her warmth and generosity extended far beyond family and friends. She was known around Pittsburgh for open-handed charitable contributions of both time and money. Dare remembered an assortment of fundraising and project volunteers joining Diana over the years at the family dining room table, planning neighborhood cleanups, food pantry days, and nursing home visits. The requests she refused were invitations to sit on nonprofit boards or to chair high-profile committees. Her philosophy was that if she moved away from the front line of the problem or need, her contribution would somehow be less authentic. "It's just me," she said. "I need to roll up my sleeves and do the work. Plenty of other people will stand in line for the opportunity to read about their own charitable accomplishments in the lifestyle section of the newspaper." After the U.S. Department of Defense had declared Army Ranger Lieutenant Thomas Chester Jordan MIA in North Korea in 1977, Diana and her infant son left Fort Lewis near Tacoma for her hometown of Pittsburgh, moving back in with her parents while she prepared for the real estate exam. Determined to leave no room for the question of whether Dare would be able to afford to attend the best college to which he would be accepted, and clinging to the dream that her adored husband would someday be rescued and returned to her, she set out to create a sizable family nest egg. The end of the Army's covert military operation arrived, but Tom's homecoming did not. Over the next decade, Diana built a booming client base and used her earnings to trade up duplexes for townhouses and tract houses, in the end choosing between the affluent suburbs of Fox Run and Chiswick, both half an hour or so from downtown Pittsburgh. She settled on Holcomb House, an 1889 two-story, red brick Victorian on Thorne Street in Chiswick, because, she said, "Chiswick has more history and character than Fox Run, and I want to surround you with things that have meaning. I want you to be a thinking, feeling kind of man like your father." Built by a Lutheran minister and inhabited by various family members over successive generations, most of whom were childless, Holcomb House had seen impeccable maintenance and minimal wear and tear in its 12 decades of life. 14 rooms, painted in a color wheel of pastel shades, all with 12-foot ceilings, shuttered windows, and hardwood floors, provided the perfect backdrop for Diana's burgeoning collection of antiques, travel treasures, and artwork. As houses went, Holcomb House had history and soul to spare. She found sanctuary in the home's encased open space. It preserved every laugh, hysterical tear, bad dream, and hopeful fantasy. Chiswick was also home to one of the finest college prep schools in Pennsylvania. Dare completed 7 years at Chiswick Academy before attending the University of Pennsylvania and Carnegie Mellon University. After graduation, he elected to remain no more than a car ride's distance from home, not so much for himself, but for Diana. She had worked hard to make a good life for him, always supportive without hovering, not burdening him with what he knew was tremendous grief and loneliness resulting from being denied first a life, and then closure, with her missing husband. While Diana hadn't planned it that way, most of Dare's childhood memories were of the two of them. Diana didn't date, that Dare knew of, but loved to golf and travel with friends twice a year, winter and summer. Dare accompanied her on her summer trips to Europe, Mexico, and Canada, learning how to order his own food in restaurants, figure taxi tips, and hold brief conversations with fellow strangers, whose first multilingual conversation with him would also be their last. Because it was well past doubtful that Dare would meet his father, Diana strove to lend Tom's ghost some dimension through pictures, stories, and an annual invitation to Tom's parents, neither of whom she was overly fond, for a week-long visit to Holcombe House. They always accepted her offer, and upon their arrival offered Dare a pat on the head and some small childhood token from Tom's bedroom shrine in their Scranton home, preserved in the condition in which he left it when he joined the army at age 18. On Dare's dresser sat a small wooden inlay box, hinges broken, stuffed with sports medals, toy soldiers, and Tom's high school ring, its band wrapped in yellow yarn. Dare wore the ring sometimes while he sat at his desk, doing his homework, positioning the ruby stone on top on his ring finger, then watching gravity have its way as the ring rolled back underneath his slender finger to the inside of his hand before he had scrawled a complete sentence. All that Dare knew about his father, all the things he learned through his mother and Tom's family, he loved. That legacy was a gift from mother to son. Diana was 56 when she received the initial diagnosis of ovarian cancer. She broke the news to Dare on the last day of his visit home from Virginia for the Christmas holiday. They sat together in the large dining room of the Chiswick house, eating English muffins hidden under spoonfuls of cherry preserves, Diana's weakness, and reading the Pittsburgh Press. "I didn't want to ruin our Christmas, but, oh, I don't know." She was fretting over something, at a loss for words. This didn't happen to Diana. "I'm just not sure. When is a good time?" she asked. "You know I don't want to keep things from you. I want to answer any questions you have, Dare." He thought she was about to tell him that his father's remains had turned up in some remote coordinates in North Korea, and that the decades of quiet limbo were over at last. Or was it possible? Was Tom alive? "Mom, what is it?" he asked. "Dad? Is it about Dad?" Diana smiled at him. Too hard. He saw the pain and fear in her blue eyes. It was something else. She stood up and pressed her hands into the small of her back, as she had countless times when Dare was young, in preparation of dressing down one of the small-minded teachers who resented his analytical nature, or fending off a patronizing auto mechanic who didn't realize she knew her way around the engine of her car. He could feel it. This was a different type of adversary. "Dare, honey," she dragged out the words. "It's cancer." The last word held such weight, it caused her posture to change, somehow driving her downward several inches into the floor. Stuck to his chair, paralyzed, Dare could produce nothing but a blank stare. She filled in the silence. "I've got ovarian cancer. Dare, I'm so sorry." That was Diana, apologizing for spoiling the day with a terminal illness. Dare searched for words. "Women survive this, Mom. You will be one of them," he said. "You will survive." He felt like a liar. He knew the odds. Possessing a strong will and plenty of money to pay for the most advanced treatment available, Diana embarked on an aggressive chemical and holistic treatment plan, and it worked for 2 years. She used that time to get her finances in order, golf the best courses she qualified for, and to spend time with Dare. They met for vacations in the U.S. and abroad, made a risky pilgrimage to Bethlehem, tapped their own maple syrup at a Vermont bed and breakfast. attended the festival in the desert in Africa, where Diana rubbed elbows for a minute with rock legend Robert Plant, and told him how sorry she was about the loss of his young son decades earlier. I know he thought I was crazy, Dare. Her eyes brimmed with tears. But Zeppelin's music was so important to my generation, to me. It buoyed me up through the lowest points of my past. Now here I am again, going back to it for strength, for the will to confront my future. What a gift! I just wanted him to know I appreciate that he's a human being too, and vulnerable, like me. Other than that isolated statement, she never voiced fear about her condition, or indulged in any signs of pain or fatigue. Sometimes Dare had to remind himself that she did indeed have incurable cancer. Dare spent his holidays and many weekends with Diana in the house in Chiswick. During tax season, when he was lashed to his desk for 3.5 months, she made her way to Virginia for week-long stays at the townhouse. Back home, Diana visited her oncologist at 8-week intervals for a routine evaluation and blood work. At night following each checkup, she poured a neat scotch and called her son to report the findings. Something in her voice was off on the evening of June 15th when she called Dare from home. Within hours of hanging up the phone after telling him about her cancer relapse, she was driving with her attorney to Mercy Hospital's oncology unit, leaving Dare to pace the length of his living room, pounding his top lip against his teeth with his closed fist until he bled, nauseated. The ball of worry in his stomach, his own little tumor, grew by the minute until it filled him to the teeth, gagging him. This time around, Dare couldn't fool himself into believing his mother would achieve a miraculous recovery. The cancer had metastasized, devouring her liver and lungs. Within a week of the diagnosis, Diana grew emaciated everywhere but her belly, which bulged from under her rib cage like she was pregnant. Her skin and the whites of her once bright eyes took on the telltale yellow tint of jaundice, before they closed in submission to a deep coma. Dare could do nothing except return to his childhood home, throw down a suitcase, and drive on to the hospital to settle into a mechanical vigil of sitting next to her bed for hours at a time, holding her cool hand, dry as paper, while he studied her face for the rare, fleeting returns to semi-consciousness that he would fill by whispering a few words. The rest of the time, he walked the cancer unit's silent halls, dodging wan, empathic smiles from nurses and other dying patients' family members, trying in vain to bargain with Diana's doctors and with God for a little more time. Exhaustion eclipsed Dare's grief as he embarked on his first weekly 8-hour trek from Norfolk to Mercy Hospital for the singular purpose of witnessing Diana's endgame. Leaving work at 10 in the morning on Friday put him in rural Maryland around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the halfway point of his trip. Most of the rolling hills that lined the Maryland highways were fenced with squat walls of round rocks and mortar, walling in various configurations of sheep, cattle, and goats, and in some cases horses. One stone fence, close to the highway, stitched in a large turn-of-the-century, brown-shingled house with white trim, a matching barn, and a sprinkling of tidy outbuildings. For some reason, that farm caught Dare's attention more than the others he sailed by on his drive. On his second Friday commute, Dare noticed a new addition to what had been the farm's empty pasture. A tall, elegant bay horse with a white sock on each rear leg stood in the middle of the lush field, unsure of what to do with the open space. Dare was no horseman, but the animal's fine head, straight back, and tucked-up gut convinced him it was more than an ordinary hack. The horse looked in his direction, flailed its long neck, and took off toward the familiarity and safety of the barn, white socks flagging each step of its long black legs. The entire scene occurred within seconds, maybe 10 or 15 of them, as Dare's car passed the farm. On each of his weekly drives to Pittsburgh over a span of 3 months, Dare caught sight of the horse exploring a different area of the farm's huge pasture, as though it was virgin territory. Dare concluded that for the horse at least, it was. The creature must be a retired racehorse or a champion show horse, like those Dare's college girlfriends in Chiswick had owned, procured for them at high-end breeding farms by their wealthy fathers. The show horses they boarded at the hunter-jumper farms, replete with elegant brick barns and paved walkways, and paid grooms who shaved off the animal's whiskers and painted their hooves with shiny polish, and even gave the girls a leg up every time they straddled their mounts for riding lessons or to train for eventing, the weekend-long summer jumping and equitation competitions that offered purses in the tens of thousands of dollars. Dare knew the grooms offered the leg-up thing as an excuse to have a perfectly toned young ass in skin-tight stretch breeches poised a couple of inches from their faces for a second or two. It was a small perk of their minimum wage job, comprised mainly of shoveling tons of horseshit, wiping crud from the sheaths and udders and noses and eyes of trembling thoroughbreds and Hanoverians, and agreeing to the neurotic demands of middle-aged barn mothers, women who were convinced that a $40,000 or $50,000 equine investment would transform their spoiled brat of a daughter into an Olympic-bound rider. That metamorphosis was a rare occurrence. Grazing just didn't seem natural to the bay horse along the Maryland highway. And it was a he, Dare discovered one day, when the animal stopped grazing, let down a foot-long penis, and sprayed a gallon or two of lemon-yellow urine into the grass. With that reflexive accomplishment behind him, he appeared unsure how to proceed, how to choose his next action. It was as though he had never had the opportunity to make a choice. Dare took the horse's picture that day, more than 1,000 pounds of the most elegant mass of muscle and bone, nostrils flared, eyes wild, at once indignant and terrified, lost in the acreage which he was unaware he dominated. The horse would survey the landscape with a prey animal's caution before lowering his head to the ground and snipping off a mouthful of grass. Then a menace lurking in the field, real or imagined, would spook him and send him snorting and bolting back to the shelter of his barn. Some days, the horse trotted the fields, pacing out his lonesome fiefdom, appearing at once fearful and majestic. 12 times, 12 Fridays, Dare grew more fascinated at the horse's magnificence. He came up with a name for him, though on no occasion he said it aloud. Apollo. It sounded regal enough, imposing, and that was how Apollo struck Dare. The last time Dare saw Apollo, it was pouring rain, the first dose of inclement weather he had confronted driving over that stretch of the road. The highway was empty, so he slowed his car to a crawl. This time the horse wasn't alone in the pasture. He stood in the rain, facing the highway, facing Dare, a man on either side of him and a woman in front of him. The woman's back was to Dare. He could see a long gray ponytail spilling down her back over her navy rain jacket. With one hand, she held Apollo's halter. With the other, she rubbed his muzzle and fed him something. She must have been talking to him too, because her head tilted and bobbed as she stroked his face. One of the two men leaned into Apollo's neck, aiming a large syringe upward. The other man stood with his hand on the horse's flank, staring at its white-socked right hind leg, which twitched and sprang up each time the animal instinctively put a portion of his weight on it. None of the people reacted to the cold rain that was soaking their clothes. They were focused on Apollo. The man with the syringe leaned into the horse's neck one more time. The woman and both men leapt back several feet from Apollo as he first listed sideways, stiff-legged, and then caved and buckled onto the wet ground. A loud tapping noise coming from Dare's car tires hitting the yellow caution strips marking the road's edge warned him that the car was about to leave the road shoulder and roll into a ditch. He swerved and skidded to a thumping standstill on the shoulder. Shaken by the scene in the pasture, he retched repeatedly, and then leaned his head against the steering wheel and broke into tears. 5 minutes later, Dare backed up his car and flinched as he looked in his rearview mirror. Apollo was dead. Gone. The three people in the pasture were placing concrete blocks at the edges of a blue tarp that rose to a 3-foot peak in the center, the height of the dead horse's rib cage. The woman's shoulders rolled with the force of her sobs. One of the men held her arm as they made their way back to the barn. Dare guessed that his outburst was as much for his mother as for Apollo. At least the horse had died without drawn-out suffering, unaware, surrounded and distracted. That would not be so for Diana. She slid along the rails of existence, disoriented and terrified when something in her brain brought her to the edge of wakefulness for a few seconds, whimpering in what Dare was convinced was pain when she was unconscious. He wondered how many more weekends, how many more times, he could say his final goodbye to her. Diana's attorney, Paul Walker, was pacing in front of Diana's hospital room door on August 31st, the day of Dare's final visit to Mercy Hospital. 3 months of spending every weekend at the hospital, and Dare had missed her final breath on that afternoon by less than an hour. Paul stammered his way through recounting Diana's last hours and final instructions, here and there swiping at his eyes with a handkerchief, telling Dare what he already knew, what everybody close to her knew. She wanted to be cremated, and her ashes held by her parents until Tom's body was found, for joint interment. Paul also informed Dare that he was the sole beneficiary of his mother's estate, valued at more than $4 million. After Dare sat with Diana's cold, ashen body in her private room, he determined that any form of the dubious concept of closure or reconciliation that may come his way regarding her death and his ensuing loss would not come there. He rang for the nurse to prepare her body for its exodus from hospital to morgue to funeral home, and walked away from his mother for the last time. Dare found Paul once again hovering within a polite distance of Diana's room. They sat down in plastic chairs in the hallway, while a nurse unhooked the web of IV and catheter tubes that had sustained Diana until the close of her half-life. Diana, Paul stumbled. Your mother was always most concerned with your financial security, Dare. Paul, referring to Diana as your mother, was outdated and unnecessary. She had ceased to be Mom when she began the frequent vacillation between conscious and unconscious. One day while Dare was visiting, he was certain that she was in pain. She moaned and shifted in her bed, eyes closed. Her doctor explained, "There are levels of coma, so much remains that we don't know. Often when patients are comatose, they appear asleep, unconscious. Their eyes are closed. We find that with some patients, their hearing may be a way to bridge, to reach them, the only way. It's worth a try." "I think she's trying to communicate," Dare told him. "I think she's in pain. She's a lifelong golfer." "Lots of strains and overuse. We are administering pain meds regularly, so I think she's comfortable. But if you want to try to reach her, don't call her Mom or Mother," the doctor instructed. "Call her by her given name, Diana. This is the root, the most rudimentary communication connection. The one word she has heard more than any other, her identity. Even if you never have before, talk to her as Diana." The doctor went on his way to another patient. Diana. Dare leaned over his mother's bed, uncomfortable with speaking her name. "Diana, are you in pain?" Again he tried, louder this time, acclimating to referencing to her by her first name. "Diana, is it your back?" he asked. She cried out a weak response. "Diana, I love you," he said. "I love you," she slurred, dry-mouthed but definite, her lips parted but still. Dare rang the nurse's bell. "We have to change this," he said as soon as a nurse shuffled through the door. "Can you bring in an air mattress or memory foam? Her back is hurting." "I'm not sure that's called for," the nurse said. "I am," Dare barked, furious at every breath of air. "We need it now." Diana never spoke again. And from that point on, Dare thought of her as Diana, the person she thought she was when she forced out the last words she uttered to anyone on earth. A kind of third-person version of herself, someone he hadn't actually met. In a small way, it helped him to distance himself from her death. "I always thought she planned to give most of her money away, Paul. I'm a bit confused at the amount." Dare's memories of Paul were as a downright jovial guy when he would stop by the house for holiday cocktails or to drop off paperwork for Diana's signature. This damp-eyed sentimentality must be the downside of that personality type. Extremes on both ends of the emotional spectrum. He offered Paul his handkerchief. She was an exceptional woman, businesswoman, Dare. Very shrewd with those investment properties of hers. If she was driven by money, she could have tripled that estate. Paul cleared his throat hard and looked through Diana's hospital room door as though she could hear him. "But that wasn't your mother." "You know her better than I, of course. She's happiest, was happiest. Don't you think? Getting out there and living her life, taking in every experience, not counting her money or planning the next deal. She had such hope for life, and commitment to that hope. For herself, for others. It's always the best that go before us, leaving us behind. Why is it that way? Paul asked. Yes, Dare replied. That's her. That's Diana. And then there's you, me, accountants and lawyers. We're paid to take those intangibles out of our clients' life portfolio. Sometimes we know them too well, don't we? Paul mustered a weak smile. Some of them we can't know well enough if you ask me. I need the keys, Paul, Dare stated, void of emotion. Excuse me, Dare? Paul asked, thrown by the erratic switch in topic and tone. The keys to my mother's car, Dare repeated. Of course, whatever you want, Dare. Would you like me to hire a towing service for the Jag so you can drive your Audi back home? Keep it. But you just bought it. Sell it. No, donate it to one of Diana's charities, Dare ordered. I'm taking the Jag. After Dare orchestrated Diana's tasteful, elegant funeral and selected some family furniture and personal effects for himself, he authorized Paul to donate Holcomb House to the local Lutheran church and resolve the remainder of his mother's estate. He vowed never, of his free will, to return to Pittsburgh.